Всем добрый день. Я вновь раз приветствовать вас на Barometer International Bar Show, самой крупной выставке барной индустрии в Восточной Европе. И с удовольствием хочу представить вам следующего спикера. Это Алекс Кратена. Я думаю, что представлять и рассказывать про Алекса много не нужно, все его знают, это рок-звезда нашей индустрии. Можно сказать, что это самый востребованный миксолог нашей планеты. Сегодня он расскажет вам, как сделать свое дело брендом. Давайте послушаем.
Good afternoon, everyone. Super stoked to be here. My name is Alex. How is everybody in Ukraine? How is everybody in Kiev? You good? That's good. My name is Alex and I'm a bartender. And if you work as a bartender, the chances of having somebody listening to you, what you think about brands, is pretty much low. In fact, when I received the call, I thought you need somebody to make cocktails for an after party because I'm kind of unemployed right now and I'm looking for a job. The industry has changed. And I think it's really amazing to have all of you here listening to what bartender thinks about how brands are being built and how they developed and what's the sort of current state of affairs and how possibly all of these things might develop in the future. The industry has changed. If you work in a bar, the chances are that somebody is going to come to your bar to sell your product pretty much every single day. I live in London, and in London, you expect a brand ambassador, brand rep, another salesperson, there's like a million of them, coming between sort of 5, 6, or 7 o'clock in the evening on Friday or Saturday night when you're 3 deep. I think like people don't realize how many brands are thrown at bartenders every single day. And I see bartenders all around the world with the next salesperson, and they go like, oh my God, why me again? I see blood running out of people's faces because there's just another person trying to sell you something. And the thing is that most of these brands which are presented and thrown at us as a bartenders they usually fail. And the reason they fail is because they are not as transparent, they are not as genuine, they are not as sustainable as they like to claim. You know, so my fellow bartenders and myself, we see a lot of commercial people from commercial world going into our world with a simple thinking of making money. And that's kind of wrong because you realize that the real niche is disappearing from the place. And brands are getting really different. Why they're getting different, what's wrong with these brands, that's what I want to really talk about today. I mean, I was advising on a beer brand which was built by one of the really big companies a couple of years ago. And it all started really nice. We had a little workshop, and I helped to build the whole business case and the consumer insights and blah, 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 blah. And then one evening, I have taken everybody from the office out to like a cool beer bars in London, because I think there's a lot of cool stuff happening in the craft beer, and the office people really need to see that. And when we got back, everybody was really excited. And I loved it as well, you know. It was really beautiful to see the enthusiasm in people's eyes. And the master brewer who was working on that project was a big capacity, was an expert. So I'm excited, and 2 months down the line, we received the first samples, and you know what? They're fucking amazing. So I'm excited even more because I think, maybe we can actually develop a brand which is really cool and edgy. But at the same time, suddenly I have to meet all these people in the suits and the ties, and we need to do focus groups. And like, that's really weird. I didn't even know these people existed. And what I realized is that in the first place, we take off absolutely everything in the terms of flavor. And then we stripe from the brand everything which was cool about the product. And suddenly you realize that you are in the position where you have a product at your table which has been striped from anything cool. And this is a big question. How do we develop brands today? What people do? Do you think it's really cool to develop a beer recipe by algorithm? I don't think it really works. Do you think it really works? I don't think so. Reason why? Because it's not a genuine brand. What most brands do is that they are like your friend who try to copy the things you wear. So they go around and they say, you know what? I kind of like that. And this is really cool. And I like what you're wearing. And they kind of put it together, and you end up with a brand which is fake, it's not genuine, and it's not niche whatsoever. Because I think building something niche is first of all about being different, but also building something which genuinely comes out of your heart. It's easy to be sitting in the office briefing creative agencies. Oh, we would like to look it like X, Y, and Z. And then you end up with products which are not genuine, which are not as sustainable, and which have a really fake story. The industry is going through massive changes, and the big brands are realizing it. And a lot of people, they establish these sort of incubators. And they grow brands because they understand innovation doesn't come from big companies. Innovation comes from entrepreneurs and usually people who are a little younger, unlike me. It's all you young people in there. So I think we're facing a big challenge where the big boys need to realize what they actually want to be doing. Either you stick to what you are really good at, which means quality, consistency, scaling, and operational efficiency, or you need to go the other way and actually let the people, the talent, which you have in your company and the expertise some of the big brands have, to make them create what they want to be creating. It's really wrong to be just giving people briefs, because what you're ending up with is cases and cases of products that are average and they will disappear from the market before year one. Now, what I want to be talking about today is some of the changes I see in the market and why the changes are happening. Like, I think business as usual doesn't really work. We are so focused these days on quarterly targets that we forget about our long-term goals. We are so obsessed with making profit that it kind of becomes a toxic culture. And I love to compare, because I used to work for a corporate hotel, I love to compare hotel managers to the brand managers, because they have one thing in common. And what they do is they have a very rapid cycle of their careers. So most brand managers and hotel managers these days, they get on the job, they take 1 year to get on speed. On a year 2, they try to make a difference, and on a year 3, they're already not there. So what you're ending up with is a lot of brands and hotels which are changing two things. The brands tend to change labels and bottles and logos a little bit, and hotels are changing staff uniforms. Why? It is because it's the most visible things which the guest or the consumer have in their eyes. I think what we really need to do as an industry is to realize that things have changed and we have a new generations of consumers coming which behave completely different. And the best brands in the business, I think they realize it. They understand, once again, that in the future there's going to be very tiny little gap between success and a failure. And the brands which will apply sustainable, eco-friendly practices, which are progressive, will actually make the difference. So let's have a look at some of the things I see happening in the marketplace and some of the great examples of what people are actually doing great. I think millennials in generally are people who are completely fed up with products that are buy, consume, discard, and repeat. I'm still a millennial. Most of you are much younger. But what most people do is like, we upset with the rapid consumption cycles. And a lot of the research done by think tanks like Club of Rome in Sweden show us that our generation and the generations to come are actually prone and inclined to buying more products if the longevity is somehow flagged. So you have generation of the iPhone users who want products to last. And that's a big difference compared to how products were made 15, 20 years ago. I think there's a lot of genuine and altruistic innovation out there. This is one hotel, South Beach in Miami, and it's a typical South Beach hotel. It's glamorous and it feels luxurious, but everything in that hotel is made from sustainable or repurposed materials. Even the room key is actually made from recycled wood, and it has a tiny little chip inside. All the mattresses you see around the hotel are not made from synthetics, but from hemp, which some of you like to smoke sometimes, every now and then. There's no plastics in the hotel. In fact, there's no bottled water. And you know why? Because this hotel has a triple filtered water in every single room. So when they're breaking down in the evening, they'll give you a little handmade jar from repurposed glass of water by the bed. The hotel is so cool that they even publish a field report. And the field report, basically, it's a bi-monthly report which shows people how to live better and more sustainable in more eco-friendly ways, not only during their stay in the hotel, but also at home. I'm one of the founders of a symposium called PUR, and during the event we had in France, one of the speakers was Douglas McMaster, one of the really pioneers of the zero-waste cooking. Douglas is amazing, but his talk, his speech, was really simple. And all he was talking about was what he does in the restaurants. Now, for me, as a bartender, it's amazing to see how many people, a half a year later, got in touch to see, to explore, to get in touch with Doug and the guys in Brighton about all the practices they do, about the compostable machines they can be using for their bar. And even though it's small changes, you always need to remember that sustainability is often about a choice. When we've been buying cups for the symposium, the tasting cups, I needed something which we could compost. And it was wonderful to realize that compostable cups made from plants are actually 30% cheaper than normal tasting cups. Now, if I go to any business owner and I tell them that I can cut your cost by 30%, I think I'm going to get a lot of applause. So these are some of the changes we see on the small scale, but on the big scale, you have people like Toyota, the automotive company, who has really been pushing the hydrogen-fueled engines. And what Toyota has done is that they shared over 6,000 patents with their peers and competitors so they can push the hydrogen-fueled engines further. Now, you guys and myself, no matter whether you are brand ambassadors, bartenders, managers, whatever you are, we work in a spirit company. We are in the spirit business, we are in hospitality. And I think in hospitality, if I tell someone that I'm going to share an information with my competitor, like that's pretty much like a sci-fi, yeah? It's like a Star Wars. Can you imagine Diageo going to Bacardi, hey, this is all the things we know? Can you imagine William Grant and Moet Hennessy and Pernod Ricard sharing all these things? I mean, come on. The people from these companies, the only time they can get under one roof is on a conference like this. So what we really need to do is we need to push and progress. I see a lot of people working very cleverly with design. And working with design often can be really simple. You get companies using design and outlays and the way their things work to help you to make informed choices. This is Reformation. It's an online clothing store, which basically on your checkout shows you all the different icons and informs you about what's the carbon footprint and any other environmental damage you're doing. So before you're actually buying something, you can really consider whether you want to be buying that. Have you ever heard of Charling? Because we have a lot of beautiful girls here. Charling, it's a really fascinating brand from China. It's a company which based its cosmetics on teas. And most of their tea is sourced in the Yunnan province, which has suffered from environmental damage quite a long time. So what these guys are doing is they understood that the ingredients chain doesn't start with the farm, it actually starts with the land. And they are helping to boost biodiversity, and they are helping to restore all the environment which has been damaged by that. They completely go against the sort of notion of luxury. What luxury spirits and luxury cosmetics have in common is the packaging, because we love heavy packaging, so it feels great in your hand, right? These guys cut the amount of materials used in their packaging by 40%, and if you come with an empty packaging to the store, you can refill the cosmetics from a big batch. You're saving the environment. And I think for us in our business, this is how we should be thinking, and this is the way we should be really going. Because the moment you start to look at the data, it kind of gets scary. Did you know that 90% of marine wildlife has eaten or consumed plastic at a certain stage of their life? That's pretty scary. It's 2016, and we have as much plastic in the ocean as we have fish. Now, the fish population is decreasing, but we keep on increasing on the plastic. So there's really time and a moment in place where we need to do something about it. Behind me on the screen, you see a saltwater brewery from Florida who developed these amazing edible six-packs. So rather than killing all the fishes and all the marine life, it is actually feeding them. And this is a simple example of great and genuine innovation. The next thing I want to talk about is the behavior of the modern consumer and the way how we choose things. We live in a world where everything seems to be in abundance. We have so many choices. But if you are a bartender, if you are a manager, if you are a distributor, inventory is always one of your problems. Do you have enough inventory to supply, or do you have a wait? Now, I see a lot of brands which are actually changing that and going completely anti-choice. And they use anti-choice architecture to sell their products in a more efficient ways. On the screen, you can see this is Darnaud's butcher shop in Paris. And what these guys are doing is they order one cow in the butcher shop, they use the whole carcass, and until the moment they sell the last bit, they don't order another cow in. And what it really shows is the respect to the animal, but also it gives people the understanding that it's not like back during the communism when there was 6 different cuts of meats, but there's over 26 different cuts of meats. And I think that's wonderful. One of my favorite bookshops in Tokyo, in Ginza, Shosen of Mr. Tonoka, is another great example of anti-choice architecture. It's a place which sells only one title per week. Now, you know what? Let me tell you one thing. When I travel, I often like to talk to people. And one of the things I'm always interested about is about what people actually are reading. Because everybody you meet knows something you don't know. many people will recommend you a book you would normally wouldn't come across. So having an expert telling you, well, this week you should buy this book is pretty amazing. And the way how they turn the business model on is they completely turn it on its head. So what they do is events, they do author readings, and they drive the interest into the books from completely different size, rather than having a bookstore, which takes a massive space and offers millions of books you pretty much won't buy. So this is the anti-choice. But what we must not forget is our born activists, is the young generation who is super cool and super good with using social media. Young people use their mastery of social media to bring their concerns online. And that's something we can no longer ignore, because young people, people like you, will let the companies and the brands know. This is Xuetl Martinez. It's a 15-year-old kid. He's the member of Guardians of Earth. He's a hip-hop singer and an eco-activist. And you say, yeah, it's kind of funny, right? This kid has presented on like 5 different TED Talks and addressed United Nations Forum twice. So you see that we really need to move ahead. Now, the last thing I want to be talking about is the brand attitude and the way how brands change their behavior. This is an example of illegal mezcal who made Donald Trump understand what they really think about him. I mean, we all know that Trump is a dick, but I think it's beautiful that brands are no longer afraid to tell their opinion, because they understand that consumer and customer and a guest is not always right. And what you need to do is to have opinion, have your values, and something to stand for. Because the market and the consumer landscape is really changing. And we see all the people who are going from sort of material-driven consumption into experiences. This is Runbase. It's a really cool place in Berlin. It's Adidas Runbase. But the only thing they don't talk about is sneakers and Adidas gear for running. Instead, they give you advice on nutrition, on wellness, on how you should be running better and more efficient. The brands realize that the traditional connections don't really work. All the big campaigns, all the licensing, celebrity endorsement, it's dying. And brands need to connect in different ways. And a lot of the young brands I see around, they very well understand that the future will lie in projects like this. Programs which improve you, which develop you, which make you grow. And this is how you create a human connection. Now, let's talk about future, because that's why we're here at Barometer in Kiev. A lot of people think that future will be full of robots. And I kind of disagree with that, because I think that future is going to be actually much more simple. And even though it's going to be much more simple, a lot of the things in the future will be imposed on us from the governments and from the general society. The things which we really need to think about as the bartenders and the brand owners is waste, transportation, and packaging. I mean, let's be honest. We are in a business of producing waste. Why? Because we are in a business of refining. No matter whether you run a brand, no matter whether you run a distillery, bar, or a restaurant, you refine and therefore you waste. Now, in the future, it will be really expensive to waste because you will be taxed on how much you actually waste. So bars and restaurants will be judged upon how much waste they produce, but also they could be taxed on how many seats they have and what's the average per that seat. And that will force you to waste less. It's going to be like in Scandinavia. You know what is the Scandinavian model for fine for the speed driving? In most of the countries in Nordics, when you drive really fast and the police catch you, they don't give you a €100 ticket. The fine is always based on a percentage of your annual salary. Why? It is because we have the understanding. Well, if I'm a millionaire, because I am who I am, and I have a lot of money, €100 is nothing. If it's a percentage of your salary, the millionaire gets equally hit like a bartender who just finished a shift. And I think that's really fair. With the waste, there's a lot of other things connected, but I think what will really change is the perception of waste. In future, things like trash cooking, trash sticky, low-impact bartending won't exist. Why? Because trash will be seen as any other product. This is an Australian brand of cosmetics. It was established by a barista and a chemist. And what these guys do is that they are using used coffee grinds to create cosmetics. Now, it's funny, right? But in the future, you won't say the grinds are a waste because the grinds will become an active ingredient. And what it really means on the bigger picture is that there's a whole new economy to be developed. Because bars and coffee places will need to produce and process the grinds in a different way. They will need to store them in a different way. And we will need to transport them locally in a different way. So in the future, we won't be thinking of something as a trash. Because in the future, everything will be a produce which has a use to it. And exactly like we've spoken about the oceans, this is a pair of Adidas sneakers which are actually made out of plastic found in sea. So Adidas harvested, as an experiment, all the plastic from the sea and turned it into sneakers. Well, I would definitely wear a pair of these, but they only made one. So let's hope in the future we got more to come. The transportation is really a next thing I want to be touching on, because transportation means expense, and transportation means emissions. And transportation means an extra cost. In the future, it will be so difficult and expensive to transport that we will be buying and sourcing locally more than ever before. So what's going to happen is you have people like myself and or you guys. We often get to ask to fly to another part of the world to showcase our drinks, right? And then because we are kind of lazy, we go, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to use the drinks I made a month ago. And we end up shipping all these ingredients because we've been lazy and because we haven't been creative enough. In the future, there won't be this safety net for lack of imagination and for lack of creativity, because in the future, it will be way too much expensive to transport. You see it already now on the ways how people are thinking about running a bar. This is Pagan Patriot in London. These guys developed a recipe of gin on the Rotavap. They've been for a number of years distilling it on the Rotavap. Now they got big enough, they went into the production. What is the motivation of a bar like this in the heart of London to be paying for bottles and marketeers and fancy labels? If you can make your own gin recipe because the technology is much more readily available, you might very well buy the gin in bulk, and it's going to cost you around €8. Now, if you go to England, to a supermarket, a decent bottle of gin will still set you around 13, 14 euro. So for me as a bar operator, there's absolutely no motivation to be using a basic gin brand. Another great example is Himcook in Oslo, a bar which has actually a distillery inside. And the heat from the distillery is actually used to heat the building. So you see that bartenders are really changing the ways how they think about produce. And when we talk about transportation, you have a lot of chefs and bartenders looking at local produce. This is Amas in Peru, in Lima. And I've been working there with the guys on the project. They're opening a second restaurant now. And what they are doing, they will completely eliminate any imported products that have to travel, because they specialize in the Amazonian cuisine, in Amazonian ingredients. And in their new bar, which is opening now in November, you won't find your typical suspects, because they simply won't be there. They will be using only Amazonian produce. The last thing we want to talk about today is packaging, which I find quite ironic, because as an industry, alcohol industry, we totally overpackage everything. We love luxurious boxes, and we love to add extra cost in the forms of recipe cards and a business cards and the satin cover. Like, to me, it's really strange because it's actually illogical. The more things you put in the packaging, the more you're paying for it. In the future, this won't be the case because the brands will need to cut down the cost. And I think the reason why a lot of the brands are not using alternative packaging is because they're a little scared. Like, we all know that we have this notion or nostalgia for a glass, and we love products feel amazing. But I think there are different and alternative ways how to package better. And I think some of the most brave brands out there, and the ones who will do it first, they will be my real heroes, are the ones who will succeed in the future. Because it's going to be about going out there and just doing it. And the brands in the future will be successful because they will be pioneers of the alternative packaging. And that's also one of the reasons why they will stand out so well on the back bars. Obviously, given that we will have back bars in our bars in the future. I was working on a project in Peru early on this year, and the goal of the project was to examine Amazonian produce. We spent a week living with one of the native communities, and what struck me was the way how these people live, because they've been living like this for hundreds of years. And it all starts with a fruit you all heard about. It's a banana. So when we arrived to one of the communities on the Amazon River, we brought some basic kind of things. And then you would have the elders from the tribes, like unpacking a toothpaste and then throwing the packaging on the floor. And everybody in the expedition was like, what the hell is going on right now? And I found it very strange. And then one of the chefs who was at the expedition, she goes like, well, I'm shocked by the lack of education. How come these people don't know? And I was standing there, I was looking at it, and I'm like, no, this is not the lack of education. What these people lack is a concept of a packaging which doesn't go back to the system. Because when you look at product like banana, you realize the genius of a marketing of the guy who created it. It's probably God, no matter which name you call him. So banana as a fruit, by the shape and by the color, is recognized not only by humans, but also by the animals. A banana doesn't need labeling because the color will indicate when the product is just about to be ready, when it's beautiful and ripe, and when you should avoid eating it. When you open a banana and when you consume banana, you throw the packaging on the floor, and the nutrients from the skin go back to the earth. I think this is a food for thought, because as an industry, we should think so much more like that. When you're packaging bananas, you see that they all fit into each other. And this is really the approach we need to take. So what I think will happen in the future is that this sort of forced creativity will change our industry more than we could ever imagine. Why? Because there won't be another option. If you're always reacting to what's happening in a marketplace, you are late. If you're always reacting to what the trends are, you're only going to follow trends. You are not leading. If you always react, you never really act. And I think in the future, we will see that the brands and companies will understand we don't need another brand of product X, Y, Z. What we really need is companies, they look for genuine solutions to problems. Why? Because people don't buy what you are producing. People always buy why you are producing it. And the companies which will take this ethos, the companies which will go out there and come up with the solutions that are sustainable, eco-friendly, and pioneering, will success and thrive. And I hope you're going to be one of them. So thank you very much.